So what we're going to do is that we'll go through the presentation, we'll go through the panel, and we have enough time at the end to ask questions. Hope that's all right. Okay? All right. So I'll just quickly go through this. We were formed 3 years back, have a lot of success in different verticals. I have spent my whole life on working on AI and Agentic AI now. Used to lead autonomous driving for NVIDIA for a few years in the Bay Area office. Found that scaling AI is extremely difficult. When I was in 2015, when I was at NVIDIA, there was a joke that autonomous driving is 5 years out. How many years out it is right now? Still 5 years out. The challenge is reliability. It's exactly, it's not a big question mark in front of everyone that, hey, I am excited to use AI and Agentic AI, but is it reliable? That's not the problem we solve. And that attached to reliability is regulations and compliance. Right? We have several important industries which can adopt, obviously healthcare, finance, aerospace. We have some large customers in aerospace like Boeing and RTX. But how do we make sure that they are complying with the guidelines across industries? Of course, healthcare has FDA, but there are and aerospace has FAA and EASA, right? It's the same SEC for finance. So how do we make sure that we are able to adopt AI and Agentic AI in these regulated industries? That's where the reliability part becomes extremely important. And reliability and quality are synonymous in many ways. But why it matters? Why it's important to have reliability and quality? Because their lives at stake in clinical decisions. Right? And we have experts here today who are going to talk about it. Right? We have providers who are adopting AI and Agentic AI, world-leading providers who will talk about it and would love to hear from them and how they see it, right? And how they are tackling these issues. Obviously, regulatory bodies have their own process and they are looking for proof and evidence, which something like us help provide. Right? And then basically, one important thing that I mentioned on my left is explainability and transparency. Every time I talk to someone in the regulatory industry, they say, hey, can you explain the results? All right, these LLMs are amazing. Can you explain why it is doing what it is doing? If it is wrong, why it is wrong? If it is right, why it is right? Right? So these are some of the important things that ties back to the concept of quality, reliability, and compliance and regulations. And there's an interesting pattern we are seeing, although I just realized that I have already some evidence against it. Clinical versus non-clinical in healthcare. Right? As a startup, we want to go after the piece which is or the use cases, right, which are easier to tackle when we have differentiated offering. And obviously, clinical is extremely difficult for various reasons. So we hear it around from so many different examples that non-clinical use cases are the first one to tackle. We have several examples of us working in healthcare, aerospace industries where we are working on non-clinical use cases. Right? These are not mission critical. There are hundreds and thousands of these use cases, assigning patients to doctors, assigning patients to beds. Right? We have customers where we are assigning images to radiologists for them to read. Right? So assignment problem, for example. Right? These are non-mission critical, non-clinical use cases. Right? So they are the low-hanging fruits which are less complicated from a regulatory compliance perspective. So that could be the first place to start, and that's where we are focusing on. But we have some very interesting perspective in the panel today. We will talk about that, how it is being already adopted in the clinical use cases, which is going to be very exciting as well. So just briefly about our platform. So we offer basically 2 parts. One is to basically help build enterprise quality agents, which are working in an enterprise setting. As I said, POCs can be done in 2 days or 5 days. Right? And the second part of the platform is to help do the reliability part. Right? How do we ensure that they are reliable? Right? So we have a continuous monitoring layer, which is looking at the input and output and the data all the time to ensure that we're able to have a high degree of confidence on the output of AI and Agentic AI. So I'm going to skip that. This is a case study, and I'm going to just quickly walk through that. It's one of the largest outpatient radiology company in the world. They do like 12 million scans of CT scan X-ray every year. Just to give you a comparison, Kaiser does 8 million scans per year. Right? So they have huge volume, and the biggest problem they have is the time of the radiologist, because radiologists are extremely short supply, right? So they are using Agentic AI to streamline their back-end processes to be able to make this part of their equation much more efficient. Because a 5-10% gain in efficiency can be significant to them, right? So I'm just going to play a quick video here.
Hey everyone, this is the order assignment agent, a general purpose agent that matches inputs like patients to doctors. What's powerful here is that you can define business rules in plain English, and the agent understands, abstracts, and applies these rules to make smart assignments and gives reasoning behind those assignments. It even learns from the past decisions to improve over time. You can use it to assign anything, like incoming leads to fill rate, direct sales reps, all based on natural language. Let's dive into the demo of patient to doctor mapping. Let's go to rules management first. Here you can see that I have defined my own rules for mapping patients to doctors. For example, do not assign high priority patients to doctors with lower ratings. For example, assign pediatric patients under 3 years of age, pediatricians with more than 3 years of experience. So I'm able to pick and choose the rule how I want to apply it. I can also define the priority. I can define whether they are active or not, and define as many as I want. And now let me go to my set of patients in Windows. So what I've done here is define a set of doctors and 3 incoming patients. I can obviously add more patients to this flow. As you can see here, I have a variety of doctors with specializations, years of experience, ratings, etc. Let me just go ahead and schedule these appointments. Alright, now my assignments are done. You can see the right patient has been assigned to the right doctor. How do I know that? I get the full reasoning as to why that happened. My assignment came in with a deep wound in the finger and was pointed to Dr. Singh, who is an orthopedist. I can also see the full reasoning and the rules that were applied and why they were applied. For example, Rule 19 prevents assigning doctors with rating below 4, and Sneha Nair had a high rating of 4.8. You can also view all the rules that were applied and the reasoning as well. At Ravi AI, we are building many more such intelligent agents for healthcare, from automating workflows, personalizing decisions, and making operations smarter with natural language and data. To know more, get in touch.
So we are open sourcing these agents as we speak, right? So anyone can try out these agents, download it from our website and GitHub and try these out. So that's what our contribution to the community as well. So these are some of the agents we are open sourcing as we speak. Scheduling and order management is one for sure. Right? Clinical coding agent is a very important one where we are seeing a lot of interest. Client onboarding is another one. Patient care after discharge is another big area of focus. Just a quick demo on how we work on increasing reliability and reducing hallucinations for these.
Hey everyone, welcome to this demo. In this demo, we will be exploring all the features of Ravi Analyst in action. Right from placing your application, evaluating it, improving basis your analysis, and getting your agent application into production. Let's go to step 1. Step 1 is tracing. In order to configure tracing, you will be required to install the Ravi Python SDK and configure the tracer within a few simple steps. Once that is done, you will be able to see all the ingested traces inside the project which you configured and my dataset which is created for experimentation. This is where all the traces are stored, and each trace can be viewed at a granular level, at a span level. This helps you visualize the complete execution flow of your agentic application. Step 2 is evaluating the performance of your agentic application. There are a host of metrics available from Ravi Catalyst out of the box across different domains, including context response, or even guardrails, or creating your own custom metrics for your specific use cases. So as you can see, we have evaluated the RAG application on a hallucination metric. Here there are a lot of points which are exceeding the acceptable number of threshold. And our goal here would be to improve this hallucination score and lower it as much as we can in order to improve the performance of this RAG application over hallucination metric. We would go to the playground and create a new system prompt and experiment over different system prompts, model configuration, and variable values. Once an improved system prompt is fixed and finalized, we would run the system prompt again on this existing dataset, and now the agenda would be to check that if the hallucination has improved or not on the new system prompt. Hence, after running the hallucination metric on the new response column, you can see the metric score and its improvement. And at an aggregate level, if you want to compare the analysis of this experimentation, you can go to the analysis section and look at the difference at the initial hallucination score and the newer hallucination score with the improved system prompt. And there is a stark difference in the average score. This is one such example that showcases how AI catalyst can help you improve your agentic application and get it into production faster. There are lots more features which you can explore. So in order to do that, hop on to docs.rava.ai where you can see all the features enlisted. And in order to know more, get in touch.
So those were the demos. With that, we will take questions towards the end. I'm around, you have my information, you can get in touch with me later. With that, I would request our panelists to start the panel. I will introduce the panelists. I'll start with Dr. Kini. Dr. Kini is a world-renowned interventionist cardiologist. She is the highest volume female interventionist in the US, celebrated for her incredibly low complication rate and being one of the New York's safest operators. Dr. Kini also spearheads digital innovation, including Sophia, an AI-augmented virtual assistant enhancing patient communication. Please give a warm welcome, Dr. Kini. Please. We have Erinne. She's a progressive healthcare executive strategist and a leading change agent. Driven by a mission to transform healthcare through data-driven, personalized solutions, Erinne has consistently delivered measurable success throughout her impressive career. As a former Chief Revenue Officer of Agentic AI, she secured over 27 deals in just 11 months and significantly expanded access to care. Her leadership at Annapoorna Health also showed revenue quadruple in just 3 years. Today, Erinne is going stealth on an exciting new venture, tackling what she calls the hardest and the most human problem in healthcare, behavior change. Please welcome Erinne. Next we have Ravi. He's the CEO and founder of CrossCare.ai, a distinguished venture capitalist and entrepreneur. Ravi brings unique expertise in AI, medtech, and clinical medicine. Under his leadership, CrossCare.ai is a leader in leveraging AI for patient engagement and care coordination in hospitals nationwide. With a strong background spanning engineering, medicine, and MBA from Columbia, please welcome Ravi. Then we have Vivek, who is the CEO of Singh, an AI-powered platform that's revolutionizing pharmaceutical manufacturing. For the past 5 years, Vivek has led the scene in helping manufacturers stay compliant and audit-ready, significantly boosting productivity and ensuring medicines reach patients faster. Please join me in welcoming Vivek. Then we have Samrat Kulkarni, who has over 2 decades of experience in tech leadership and is currently building a new venture in global health, following his role as lead director of data science at Singh, where he led AI-powered clinical analytics. His impressive career includes 15 years at Bell Labs, leading groundbreaking R&Ds in areas like broadband access, impacting communities worldwide. With deep expertise in healthcare AI, predictive analysis, and digital transformation, Samrat has a proven track record of leveraging advanced technologies to solve significant global challenges. Welcome. we have an amazing panel, and this is going to be very exciting. First, I have some thought process. I'm going to just have a discussion with the panel. Then we'll open up for questions, and I hope some of the panelists can stay back a little while for you to have interactions with you. Right? So first of all, I will start with, and let me get another mic actually. So I would request the panelists to talk about their experience in AI and agentic AI and what they think about the future of this technology. Yeah, so please start. Yes, sir. Yours, sir.
I think, there are lots of terms being bandied around in AI these days, and different people have different experiences and discussions in the same term. So it might help to just frame what agentic AI actually comprises, the evolution of AI. As most of you folks know, AI started with what is categorized as perception AI. Essentially, perception AI meant that the agent was able to perceive the intent of your utterance, or to be able to distinguish between images. For example, this is a cat, not a dog, that sort of stuff. So once it was able to understand the intent of your utterance, it started to respond back, and that's what is called generative AI. Essentially, it was able to generate a response, right? To reason based on your query, and then generate a response. But after it was able to basically understand what you said and generate a response, it needed to do something, which was essentially taking decisions and acting on it. So decisioning and actions is effectively what agentic AI comprises. Basically meaning that the agent has agency at this point to take decisions and take actions based on that. So that's the framework I think that is currently mostly being pursued, these three elements. Right? There are lots of foundational technologies underlying it, like conversational AI and intent recognition and a whole bunch of things. And so most AI applications at this point have elements of all of these three things, because that's what essentially are precursors to taking an action. So agentic AI is very much the framework today, but I think most of the evolution is happening around the orchestration layer at this point, which is essentially means that if you've got a bunch of agents, each of them is specialized in doing a particular task, and what people are finding is the narrower the task and the deeper it gets, the more efficient that agent is in that particular aspect. You end up with a plethora of agents, and then orchestrating their actions relative to each other in order to take an optimal decision and then an optimal action is what is currently evolving. The next step, obviously, is headed towards what is called superintelligence, which is essentially trying to go beyond AGI, beyond what human endeavor are normally taking. And the typical area at this point that is mostly being researched in order to implement elements of that in applications is reinforcement learning, which essentially takes it one step beyond machine and deep learning. And so we have just started on reinforcement learning aspects, and we're trying to pick an appropriate use case that justifies the possibility of reinforcement learning. And hopefully we're going to, I would say it'll be early next year by the time we're actually able to prove out an application that is operationalized using that. So I'd say it's certainly at this point not out there in existing applications. But agentic AI is definitely been implemented in a number of places, including in several places that I'm familiar with right on this panel. So that's how I would.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. And I'm a healthcare professional physician. The question comes: why is a physician interested, in technology or adopting AI? Reason being, after the pandemic, we did see something, and that was the shortage of both nursing as well as many physicians were burnt out. So then the question comes, is there a regular charting? It takes a lot of time to be in the EMR, understanding that talking to patients, talking to families, consenting, a lot of things takes toll on people, nursing as well as physicians. And there is a projection that in the coming years, which we are talking about 25 to 30 years, there will be a lot of shortage of physicians as well as nurses. And so something has to be done by us as physicians. And I always like to think out of the box, and I always like technology. So going back to your point, I mean, Ravi has nicely explained what are the various AIs that are out there, subterms, and they are all interchangeable. Everything works together. It's not like you can do one thing, everything. So we actually used, means we were probably the first one, at least ourselves, because in cardiology and cardiac cath lab, we are the first in Mount Sinai to having used that agent, and we called that agent Sophia. We were discussing clinical and non-clinical. Non-clinical, that are many use cases, and it's very easy. Maybe easy to adopt, people will not have issues. When it's clinical, it's not just the patients, it's the physician also have issue with adopting that. Someone else is going to talk to the patients, will they understand? So it was not easy to start this route, but we are glad that we have successfully piloted Sophia with excellent outcome. So now the question comes, what we actually did. So when somebody is coming for a procedure, right, what is called as an angiogram, you get into the heart, you need to have dye, then you get procedure like a stent, and there's so many things. So one patients are very apprehensive. Somebody has to explain what it is. Based on means there are important rules both by FDA and the healthcare, all hospitals, they will not allow someone to talk to the patients just like that. So required a lot of training, and I think like everybody's mentioning, guardrails. And one thing I think key that you need when you are doing or you are selecting any solution, or you are yourself creating a solution, you need an expert in the field to be part. So that the training happens appropriately. And that is where I think the question about hallucination also happens, that you've got to make sure you're training that agent well. So whatever questions are asked are related to that procedure. So that is what we did, work with Crosscare, and we were able to get this agent ready. So you have my team, which is Derek. He's actually a nurse practitioner, a nurse who works with me in the lab, and then my other partner in crime, who is Andrew. So he's more of in the innovation part. So you got to work together in the sense, you got to understand what is it the physician wants, and then we also know every day we are talking to the patients is what we expect of the patient. The biggest reason for avoiding adoption in the healthcare by the physician, and subsequently when the patient comes to see you or the family, is they are wondering, would this person be like a human? Would the person be empathetic? Will they be able to answer all the questions? And what we found with Sophia, probably more empathetic truly than a human. Highest patients will answer the same questions multiple times, does not raise voice, does not get upset, 24/7, 365 days. Like we make a joke, no sick calls, all these things happen. So the hallucination rate for that, in 90 days we completed over 800 calls, 4,000 minutes, was less than 1%, which was amazing. And then you think, okay, not maybe, because the kind of patients that we see are mostly elderly patients where a lot of comorbidities, they may not adopt it. It was never like that. Maybe about 40%, 40 patients said in that entire cohort, we do not want to talk to AI. But the rest were very welcoming, and they are ready for the change because they know this is going to happen. So this is something that they have to get ready for. So that is what it is. So biggest question was physician. Now physicians are slowly understanding, yes, agents can help us. There are several other things that may be used in the healthcare, which is, I think you also spoke about ambience and all that, which is very important because both for the trainees, because most of the time they are based, their time goes in charting, so something like that can be used. But agent, already a lot of things have been discussed, but the clinical use, you got to be just cautious, but agents can be used in clinical use. But the biggest thing, and over I highlight, is that you need healthcare person, which is both physician, nurse, be part of the training, so that agent is trained well, and there are multiple guardrails. What will happen is there are various specialties in medicine, so every specialty we should be able to handle each of those specialties.
Thank you. This was very, very interesting. Erinne, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm probably the least qualified in this panel to talk about agentic AI and the technology itself. But what I can talk about is the adoption and the understanding and the desperate need for process engineering around the adaptation of agentic AI within healthcare. So healthcare is where I'm specifically focused. And for 25 years I've been in this industry, and I was commenting earlier, I started my career as a change management consultant. So ironically, my whole career has watched healthcare adapt and change to technology, but not adapt and change to process orientation around that technology. And so when you're coming into an organization that deals with, and I say this all the time, the most intimate of industries in the entire world, there's nowhere else you go into by birth and die. And our amazing physicians and caregivers take that very seriously, as we hope they would. So when you get into an environment that is now largely capable of taking on fully automated workflows from those that traditionally have been led by humans, there is a tremendous amount of risk that is perceived. Whether it is tested and proven that the risk is lower, it still has to be engineered around efficiency. And there's a lot of handoffs in those processes, and there's a lot of liability in where those processes start and end. And so when I saw the advent of the possibility, and this is an incredible possibility, I have spent my whole career in focusing on access and access to care and improving access. But that requires, for the most part today, still people. And unfortunately, there's not enough of them, and it's going to get worse as we see the industry struggle with shortages. So when I had the opportunity to see what agentic AI could do and the future state of AI in replicating human workflows and taking that to a whole new level of actually bringing access to all in a way, I was super excited, and I thought, this is it. This is the tipping point. This is where all things change and healthcare becomes democratized and everyone can get what they need. But in true healthcare fashion, it takes a lot longer than most industries to adopt it. And unfortunately, once they do adopt it, it's years of process engineering around safety and around liability and around communication and role changes that unfortunately also take a lot of time. So probably my biggest lesson learned in this amazing technology is that, especially in healthcare, it will be a tipping point. It is going to be a game changer. How fast that's going to occur is going to be highly reliant on how open to process engineering and change the entirety of the system is going to be around it. I think there's a major difference between the acute care setting and the ambulatory setting. So how many of you go to CVS for some of your care? Yeah, pretty much everyone on this panel, or this group, probably raise their hand. You had an ear infection, you went there, probably. It's the advent of retail health. It's the access of health care that is in now your corner store that is changing the ambulatory requirements of how to get in to see someone and get cared for. So again, agentic AI can be very conducive to the types of healthcare that you need, but at every level of care, it needs a different engineering process and a different adoption level. And that should mean that everyone in healthcare should have a job forever. Whether you're technological or not, because there's a lot of change management to go with that.
So I am the least qualified person.
No.
I'll just introduce myself first, so that because I'm everybody from healthcare here, but we actually work with pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. So Lucene as a company, which we started, is an enterprise software platform, an enterprise AI platform, which we sell to pharmaceutical drug manufacturing companies like Pfizer, Novartis, and all of that. And they use our platform to execute their manufacturing and quality operations, so that they can do stuff faster, they can make fewer errors, and ultimately, I can relate so much to what Dr. Annapoorna said about the shortage of staff, nurses, doctors. But on the other spectrum, there is a huge amount of shortage of drugs as well. And at any given point of time, there are more than 200 life-critical drugs which are always in shortage in the US. And whenever drugs are in shortage, on an average, patients end up paying 8.5 times more price to really access them. So, healthcare is becoming more and more expensive day by day because of the drug shortage problem. And I think it ultimately brings me to what you also said about the access, the accessibility, and I'll also add affordability. So going back to your question, what does AI or agentic AI hold as future?
Yeah.
As far as my domain is concerned, I think it will bring accessibility and affordability of patients getting access to the drugs. Now I'll talk more about it.
Sure.
I think as we go, but I'll just pass it on to Samrat.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, thanks for being here, by the way, all of you. Just to round it out, in terms of framing, we're talking about agentic AI, and I think Ravi, you started off talking about the journey in the AI world. This is the year of agent AI agents. That's what White House has said, right? Every year there's going to be a marketing buzz, a brand, and it generates a lot of excitement. So, but then having said that, to me, we have to be very, very clear. And I like the framing where I would say co-pilot versus an agent. A co-pilot sort of framework means there's always a human in the loop. When we talk about agentic AI, we're really talking about a fully autonomous system that operates on its own. So let's be clear in terms of the distinction. So what that means is there is a lot of risk that comes with that, because now you're trusting a machine to essentially do these tasks where a lot of it is at stake. And we're talking about regulated industries. I spent the past 5 years at CVS Aetna, working with a lot of clinicians. I think Dr. Lee was saying how it's important to have a team sport in developing these things. Work with a lot of MDs, nurses, building these sort of systems. So I like the promise. Yes, this is the year of agentic AI, but there is a lot at stake here. The other thing I would say, between finance and healthcare, I have a lot of friends. This is certainly New York, the financial capital of the world. If you lose somebody's dollar, right, you can always put it back. But if somebody's health record, for example, gets sold, there is, let's say you build an agentic AI system with all the right guardrails. If you have no control over what these agents are doing on behalf of a member's health record, there is a lot of risk. And once a member's health record is out in the open, it's an issue. This is very personal, and it's super important to keep that protected. Yes, there are regulations, there are HIPAA regulations, and so on. But the point I'm trying to make is there is so much at stake here in healthcare, so we have to be really careful in the way we implement these agentic systems. The other thing, we're talking about multi-agents here. So think of many agents working autonomously to reach a certain outcome, right? And for those of you that have done systems engineering, every time you add an extra layer, you're introducing complexity. So let's say you hypothetically build an agent that's 99% accurate. That's the first step, but if that agent has to do 10 steps, mathematically, your accuracy is gone down by definition. Like 10 steps, you're already at less than 90%. Now, if you build an agent that's 80% accurate, and there are other agents that are also 80% accurate, eventually you'll end up with a super agent that's only 50% accurate, right? So there's a lot of complexity when you chain the word orchestration is used. So yes, yes, I like the promise. But it's a wait and see for me. And then especially just in terms of where I see the opportunity though, care management, that's where I spent a lot of time. So for the non-clinical, non-diagnostic tasks, that's where certainly let's prove this out there, and then we can get to the more complicated clinical diagnostic sort of use cases. So those would be my early points.
And I'm gonna just ask, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, and I talk to them, some of them aspiring entrepreneurs as well. So they're looking for use cases where healthcare can be applied. So I would request the distinguished panel to talk. Maybe say like one or two use cases where they think it will going to become realistic over the next year or so, right? So that's where our budding entrepreneurs can start to spend energy as well, right? So we'd love to hear your thoughts on a couple of use cases that comes to the mind first.
So use cases for clinical use cases. One is intake, right? A patient is coming, somebody has to speak to the patient, do all the intake, that's one. Second, like we said, pre-procedure calling. Pre-procedure calling will be mostly for, there are some ambulatory procedures where simple, straightforward questions are to be created and give instructions. Right now, I think just instruction, you have an appointment with a dentist at 9 a.m. has been happening for over 10 years. But if you need more than that, you don't have to take NPO, which is especially for GI procedures, other kind of urological procedures, if anything has to be done, stop medication, medication questionnaire, that is one for the procedure related. Then also what happens is when you go inside a procedure, right, there is somebody has to explain and do everything, okay? When you are either ambulatory setting, hospital setting, there you can use agents. Once the procedure is done, it's best practices that usually a physician or a nurse calls back the next day, and sometimes a month, even after a month, or just a reminder. So that's another use case where somebody is calling, right, and giving instructions, or having the chat. That's one. Frequently asked questions. Always patients, relatives, everybody has frequently asked questions related to the procedure or related to their health, no matter which part of your body there is concerned. So that itself you can have another agent, frequently asked questions for that. Now, making appointments, like I said, is always there, but there are several, I think, companies already, whether they're using agents or non-agents, just appointments are being made, reminders are being there in every single, part itself. Going just for a procedure and explaining everything, that itself is vast. What I meant is, you can say, okay, I have created an agent, but like I said, you can take each specialty, but a physician has to be involved, the nurse has to be involved, and you have to make sure that whatever the agent is talking is highly specialized for that particular procedure. So, there's a lot of use cases.
Really good. Yeah, thanks for that insight. Thank you. Anyone else wants to take that here, please?
We have, I'll talk about a few use cases that we've implemented, and so we know that they are working. So, patient engagement is obviously a natural here. And as Dr. Kini said, moving the process beyond the table stakes of taking appointments, changing appointments, prescription refills, things of that nature. Basically then moves you into the realm of clinical medicine. And so the only way you can have a comprehensive patient engagement process is if the agent is trained to reliably respond to clinical queries. And the key there are two things that we found. One is you cannot build these things without clinical engagement. In other words, if it's a bunch of technologists sitting in a room, even with a so-called panel of physician advisors, it doesn't work. You've got to work actively with physicians who are actively doing that every day. And so it takes time to get their knowledge into the training process. That's one. And the second element is what I call sort of negative reinforcement, which is effectively another word for guardrails. In clinical medicine, the most important thing is not what you know, meaning what the agent knows, which in and of itself is a challenge, but to know what queries you cannot answer, and you have to kick it up to a clinician. And so basically to know that this is a question that I'll have a nurse call you back for, that is the key. And if you cannot do that, the liability from the patients itself, or the backlash from a regulatory perspective, or from the patients themselves in terms of the quality of their care is huge, and no hospital system will allow that. So essentially, as long as you train the agents on what it cannot answer, and you work actively with practicing clinicians to develop the agent, then you get a product that you can deploy. And so it's hard work. We've done it in a few places. That's why I'm saying it's hard work. It takes a while. Here's a team that can attest to it, who did it at Sinai, maybe one of the most critical health systems in the world. And so, it's a very active use case, patient engagement, but as I said, training the board with the clinical knowledge and with the knowledge of what not to respond to is the key. But there are other, since we are on the topic of agentic, I want to pick one application that basically is very simple to understand, but effectively does orchestrate several agents. So a pediatrician, example that we're working with, one of their biggest problems in patient engagement is ensuring that their clients or their patients, who are all 2-year-old, 3-year-old, that their mothers bring them in on time, or fathers these days, to basically get the vaccination on time. So if you've got a measles vaccination, let's say it's an 18-month vaccination, at this point, from a reimbursement perspective, pediatricians are penalized if they don't get the vaccination on time for their patients. So now, a lot of time therefore is spent on continuously calling and saying, listen, it's between 18 months and 24 months, you've got to get this vaccination done, please bring your child in and so forth. Now, if you can basically be orchestrated with, or you collaborate with the patient charts. Let's say there's an agent who every time 18 months is crossed for a patient age, you know that measles vaccination has to be done. Then you figure out another agent that says that I don't see any appointment for the measles vaccination, right? So then step 3 is this agent calls. The fourth agent then figures, as a result of the call, was an appointment set up or not? And so it schedules a follow-up call, let's say, the week after. All of these are separate agents, they're simple tasks. And you can orchestrate them to be completely automated. And you'll be surprised as to how much productivity this lends to the front office of a pediatrician. So here is, an application, it is an agentic application, it's orchestrated, but it can be done today without really too much complications. In fact, it helps the quality of patient care, right? Okay. And so that's another application, that we actually went in with a different use case, and the front office said, this is what bothers me most. This is where I spend most of my time on. So we pivoted and changed the flow to take care of this problem before we taking care of the other issues that we actually thought we'd go in and take care of in this pediatrician office. So there are many, applications of this nature. A third is care coordination. So these folks out here are experts, along, with VHealth, to basically launch a care coordination app essentially reduces the time for a critical patient with a STEMI condition, heart attack, for instance, or stroke, to get care. Okay? And this goes all the way from the time that the first responder goes on a 911 call to somebody's house, right? Brings them into the emergency room. And from the emergency room is properly guided very quickly into the cath lab or wherever the treatment has to be done, right? That time here is critical, and you're talking about minutes, right? Every minute you reduce out here is effectively saving lives or reducing the overall cost of care, because the patient then, in terms of physiotherapy and things, from a recovery perspective, costs a whole lot more over its lifespan. So very critical, right? Again, an area of intense focus that even people who reimburse, meaning the payers, are focused on. Hospitals are focused and are judged on the quality of how quickly this care was delivered. So if you have care coordination, AI-powered agent, right? Again, agentic, because each one, there are multiple specialties involved here, right? Intake, nurse in an emergency room, to the ambulance driver, for example, and a cath lab practitioner like Dr. Kini, talking about different skill sets, different ways of talking, different locations all over, and they all coordinate in order to improve the speed to care. This is massive. I'm happy to tell you it's implemented right now. These folks have saved, I don't know, multiple lives every day because this is working. So you're looking at many things that are happening in the midst of all this talk about AI, where agentic applications, which essentially means, as you said, a bunch of agents, but coordinated, orchestrated in a way where they're autonomous and taking their own decisions. With human intervention when needed, that's the key, and will never go away in healthcare. But it's largely autonomous, at least in areas of the entire process flow. So I wouldn't say completely automating. I mean, that's, just talk, and you can do it in limited ways. But even if you did it in limited ways and only picked it up when the practitioner or human intervention was absolutely required, you're still achieving huge improvements. And I'm not talking just productivity improvements. These are saving lives. So these are some applications, that are out there today. And I think you'll keep seeing the expansion of such applications using agentic frameworks to save lives.
Thank you. Yeah, Erinne?
I'll keep it brief but very direct. I think the decision, I've spent a number of years talking about use case application at a really exciting place in healthcare, and what I would say to any entrepreneur considering their use case and where they want to focus, I would first ask you about your business model and where it is you're selling into for that use case. Because today, as I just said earlier, process engineering requires you to take agentic AI and break down a process and apply it in a workflow that is, one, going to be dependent on who you're selling to and where their need is, and two, if they're going to separate workflows from, say, front office to back office, to care coordination and follow-up care, to patient engagement, to appointment scheduling, to follow-up post-discharge. You have to look at the entirety of that workflow and understand where you're going to plug agentic AI into that workflow, and then determine how you best fit into that process for them and how are they going to pay you. Because if they don't get reimbursed for the action by which you're taking over in that workflow, they're not going to see a lot of value except for you replacing time, replacing efficiency, gaining efficiency, replacing people. And so really, really, before you get excited about a specific application of agentic AI in a workflow, you really have to think through, who am I selling to, at what stage in their processes are they using and applying this to? Is it much more clinical or less, or more administrative? Is it on the front end of a clinical process that we have to break apart now the intake process from when the nurse reviews, once the intake information becomes a part of that record, to when you're discharged post-appointment? Every single one of those moments in that process have to be reanalyzed and understood when you apply agentic AI to that process. And if you don't break that apart, you won't have an ROI, a value creation conversation that you're ultimately going to need if you're trying to understand how much money you want to make in your business per use case or per license or per patient or per doctor. Your pricing model then has to follow suit, and then your total TAM has to reflect that. And so you have to ask yourself a lot of questions before you get super hooked on a single use case or a set of use cases to use Agentic AI on. You have to analyze that on your pricing model and understand how they're going to use that workflow in its entirety and how they're going to pay you. And you definitely have to understand, is it in an ambulatory setting or a clinical setting? I feel very strongly that because of the way that it was just described on the necessary training and fine-tuning and guardrailing that is needed for a clinical use case, you can probably price that in a more extreme way than you would on a follow-up call post-discharge, or which is still semi-clinical and very important to be fine-tuned. But in now my space, where I'm getting more into coaching and longevity coaching, you don't need a clinician necessarily, you don't need a license to deliver that. It's less dependent on guardrails, but still following a protocol. So again, I think that the most advice I could give any entrepreneur thinking about how to apply Agentic AI in any industry, frankly, follow the money, understand the process by which you're replacing, really ask your audiences on their return on investment to understand how they're going to pay you and where they find the value in applying it. Everyone gets excited about replacing labor. If they don't actually replace labor with what you're doing, they're not going to see the same value as you did in going to market and adjusting to how you want to make money off of this great technology. So my advice is much more business oriented from a lot of lessons learned over the years, and happy to share more with anyone afterwards.
So I agree with one thing you said.
Just one?
I disagree with one thing you said.
Okay, like it.
So I agree that you have to ask a lot of questions before you can decide the use cases. And are there any product managers in the room? Any software product managers?
One back there. Okay, great.
For designers, yes.
Yeah, I mean, design is basically the same skill nowadays. So essentially, I'll just talk about what we did. So today, if we analyze any pharmaceutical manufacturing companies, roughly 12 to 15% of their staff is a job title called Quality Assurance Executive. So a simple QA person who is just verifying the work done by other people. It could be work done by a person who did the manufacturing, a person who did the testing in the lab, a person who wrote down the report, right? And because pharma companies need to follow lots and lots of regulations, they have really thrown people at the problem. Why do I say that? Because if you compare this 15% to any other manufacturing industry, it is at least 5 times higher. The nearest is actually medical devices, which is 8%, and any typical manufacturing industry will not have more than 2 to 3% quality assurance staff. And we came up with these figures after scrapping LinkedIn blog a lot. So which was really the foundation that, or the evidence that there is a lot of inefficiency in the way compliance is being managed at pharma companies. So what we then really did afterwards is we went after job title after job title after job title. So with the QA as well, you can divide the entire QA team into roughly around 10 to 12 different type of job titles, which they post on LinkedIn jobs, job descriptions. And this is where I disagree with you. You could actually go after their jobs. And essentially a skill like review is a skill which can be replaced. A skill like analysis is probably a lot difficult to do. And this is another way of thinking about how to come up with use cases. So that's why I was asking if there are any product managers or designers. So essentially, the way human brain works, as a human, we are good at authoring stuff. We are good at comparison. We are good at doing simple mathematical analysis. We are good at assignments. The human skill that I think all of you have picked in your company.
Yeah.
So humans have these core cognitive skills. I think one of the things you mentioned, Ravi, was calling, right? So calling could be a use case applied to n number of industries. So you can really pick a skill and apply it vertically into one industry like life sciences or healthcare or finance, or you could really go after job title after job title within a given vertical as well. I'll just add one more information here. So essentially, there is a lot of adoption being seen right now in the healthcare, and one other evidence I want to give you is that US FDA itself has launched just exactly a week ago. The FDA commissioner, the newly elected FDA commissioner, announced last week that they had actually launched an AI agent called Elsa. Probably Sophia and Elsa might be friends. So what Elsa does, Elsa essentially reviews the drug approval packages submitted to the FDA by pharma companies. In the old days, there used to be big trucks lined up after FDA office, full of documents, and you have to really get into a line because faster you get the approval, you get the exclusivity to sell for over 80 days. So I mean, literally people used to line up after the FDA office with huge trucks. Today they do it more electronically, but still the workload is like huge, and which used to take about 2 to 3 days of time of one highly qualified PhD level scientific reviewer to go through like one set of documents. Now takes 6 minutes, as claimed by the US FDA commissioner. So now those FDA inspectors are coming to the pharma companies and expecting the same kind of digital maturity, which is actually very good for our business. Hopefully it can translate to a lot of the opportunities created for anybody who is looking to start a new company. So just to summarize, there are, I think, a lot of ways to think about use cases. But if I had to really do it from zero, I mean, now we have done a bit, so can't go back a lot. But if I had to think about it again to do from zero, I would pick a skill and try to apply it into one industry where I have leverage to sell more and more. But then I would really build a sales team around or marketing engine around, spreading it across horizontally. And you can really build a specialization around, let's say, a particular skill like calling or reviewing or thinking or analytics or whatever. Yeah.
And thanks a lot for that perspective. So, Samrat, I'm going to change the question for you.
Sure.
So you are the techie in the room, right? With a lot of experience in building complex systems, including AGP systems. So, what is your view of the technology? Is it ready to be scaled in healthcare, regulated industries, life sciences, pharma, right? I would love to hear your views on the technology maturity, right? Is it ready for large-scale adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career at Bell Labs. Voice was hot, right? And then this is circa 2001, 2002. They said voice is dead. It's the internet. Everybody is going to interact asynchronously. Why talk to a human? Right? There's email, web applications, and so on. And it's amazing. Voice is back now, and especially when it comes to healthcare, which is deeply personal. The next best thing to talking to a real human clinician is a voice agent. That, and I think Dr. you were referring to that. They're not tired. They can do inbound calls. You can interact with them 24/7. So I feel like that capability, there is a lot of technical innovation that's gone into that. So being able to communicate in real time, you have to be able to answer a question or find information and respond to a member, either way it's call center, a call center use case, or for example, if there's a AI care plan where you have a voice agent talking to a member doing a risk assessment. So I think the technology is there. A lot of investment has gone into it. Now it's really the question of getting the ROI. One use case that I've been working on is in the space of environmental resiliency. So think of a natural disaster, like for example what happened in California during the wildfires. Imagine a health plan that has information about a member's underlying disease burden, what medications they're on. You can activate AI agents to call hundreds of thousands of members simultaneously, educate them about their personal risks, create care plans for them, and avoid hospitalization spend. So overall, I do think, and again, entrepreneurs in the room, maybe I'm biased, but voice is where I'm placing my bets on, as opposed to maybe web agents, and certainly when it comes to healthcare, being able to have that ability to spin up products and solutions with all the guardrails that we talked about. But yeah, I think we're there, and acquisition costs certainly, they're going to. I do think there's going to be compression in price. Competition is a good thing in America. I was talking to an NVIDIA friend of mine yesterday, and in the Bay Area, a whole bunch of investments have gone into technology companies, right? And being able to price competitively, so you get more use cases and more entrepreneurs involved that can demonstrate ROI. I do think that's the promise. So certainly, voice agents, we're there, we're ready. We just have to get the right guardrails.
Perfect. Thanks for that perspective. Next question for Dr. Kini. Right? First of all, I appreciate Dr. Kini's initiative being so forthcoming in adopting technology in a regulated industry. We know that these decisions are not taken lightly. Right? So what risk mitigation strategies you usually think when you're adopting technologies? You put human in the loop. What different aspects you care about and put in place to make sure that the risk is minimized?
I think, like I highlighted earlier, so when we were adopting or creating this solution, so we all were part of it. So it's not easy. Like I think Erinne was mentioning, one is the same. There are people, even though we physicians only think of one thing, that how do we take care of patients, how we save life, that's what we are thinking. But then there are people above us, or administrators, who are only thinking how the dollar keeps coming inside the hospital. So she was right in understanding that, yeah, we all feel excited, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, new devices, new technology, but there's somebody above you watching, how we are saving money. We are saving life, we want to save money. So going back to your question, is that very important that you are involved. So for it to be adopted in healthcare, you need physician in the loop. Physicians should be involved. So unless that happens, it's not that easy for everybody to think, or let me do that and let me not do that. So for me, like I said, I like technology. We actually training, right? To train people. The usual way of training is the good old time where we used to read books, and then later on in the last 15-20 years we started using videos, understanding, seeing. So we actually we do procedures and we relate, we teach other people. So this was being done even before pandemic, even before Zoom existed. We used to do that, a telecast, and teach people from around the world. Then we grew up reading books, but then I understood that nobody carries books, nobody reads the way we used to read and the way we used to go through things. So we created a lot of apps. So if you go, it's actually we created apps, and every time that we do that was that we wanted to not only help patients, but to help patients, we can help patients who are in and around our area, but how can you help patients around the world? So what we learned, we created apps so other people can adopt. So I'm just trying to say how we were adopting technology way before everything came. So now going back to the point of yours is that yes, it is there, and regulatory means always everybody is worried. Two things. One, because it is somebody's life, right? So number one in USA is that you do what's called as defense events, because there are lawyers outside if something goes wrong. So the legal is always watching in the hospital that whatever you're doing, it has to be approved by them. Then there are other regulatory agencies who make sure that, actually when we started Sophia, it was the first clinical agent, like I said, we started. There was nothing existing. When a patient comes to the hospital, they have to sign a lot of forms. So we had to change the form saying that we have now started using AI. AI was being used for reading X-rays, CT scans by radiologists. Then we are doing echo scans by cardiologists. So that being used, but it's always said read by AI, confirmed by a physician, and physician has to sign. So very important. So the patient knows that somebody has overseen or done that. And that is where the agents also help, that whenever a patient enters the room, if you are using an agent to take history or something, you need a consent, because saying that, listen, a human means usually you have a fellow or nurse practitioner is not doing the job, but an agent is doing the job. And we do see resistance there, but not a lot. People are getting adopted. So lot of regulatory agencies are there. So going back to Erinne's point is that you can get excited, because excitement and vision is always good. Dream big, because something will come out of it. So I'm all about dreaming big so that something will happen. But when you are going to an hospital and trying to get this into healthcare, it's not easy at all. But it will be adopted, but it will be slow adoption. But once it is adopted, right, I think then there is a way, then it's going to move fast. But non-clinical, there is a lot, but clinical will be very slow. But what I meant is that doesn't mean people out there should be thinking and should come up with newer ideas, because you don't know what is really going to take on.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for someone like you to start adopting a clinical use case, right? Which is not very common to see. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think the next question I would put it for Erinne. So then you have been doing selling, right? An amazing selling over the past few years to different part of the healthcare system, right? So how do you, and obviously you're communicating ROI or value to your customers, and how do you balance the pushback in terms of regulatory aspects and the things being worked properly all the time versus the ROI? But how do you are able to close the sale when there is so much concern around regulatory aspects of the industry?
Wow, that's a complicated question. Well, what's really interesting is that when I started selling, especially most recently, right, at Hippocratic, there was just getting started this concept of AI governance councils, right? And so, dependent on where we were selling into, the size of the health system, the level of risk, whether it was a clinical, risk or more administrative function. This is why I say the use case selection is very, very important when you're going into the discussion in healthcare. And there is always this multi-layer selling approach. It is a very complex consultative sale. Healthcare is just difficult because you're not selling to one person ever. You are always selling to, again, the team of people that are involved in the process by which you are selling into. And because it's an enterprise sale at all levels, all the time in healthcare, when it involves AI, you're never going to be able to sell what I used to be successful at my first startup is the bottom-up approach, right? And so healthcare is complicated and fragmented. I say it's the last standing cottage industry in the world. And if you're a good salesperson, you try to figure out what your least difficult entry point is, and you go start there, and then you sell up or in, right? And in most cases, that works because healthcare is so fragmented, and it's independently owned budgets, and for the most part, many different departments. And so if you just find that one person at an institute level or a department level or an administrative area, HR or finance, then you can usually get a sale done, at least a small entry benchmark sale, and you can work yourself in. In Agentic AI, it doesn't exist anymore. You cannot sell AI to healthcare without getting oversight approval. And so now there's really this even more complicated discussion because you have to be able to explain the regulatory risk, the liability risk, the technology by which you have to explain it to avoid those risks. I had to present to AI governance councils, and again, remember, I'm the least qualified person on this panel, so you do not want me presenting to AI governance councils on the technology itself. So, our team had wonderful, amazing engineers and leaders, and our CISO was fantastic. So you have to take a team to sell to healthcare. And you have to have a really knowledgeable team that has seen some of the future already, or can help risk mitigate and understand that discussion. Healthcare still doesn't understand the risks of this industry yet. We haven't seen all of it yet. And dependent on the area, acute, clinical, administrative, ambulatory, think even PT, OT, areas of the business that are ancillary, there's different levels of risk. And we haven't seen all of those impacts yet. So again, it's a consultative sale. You have to go in understanding, and this might be one of the benefits of being a 25-year veteran of healthcare, is that I get it. It's an industry I grew up in. It's an industry I'm passionate about. I care most about the patients that it's serving because I've lived in it and grew up in it. And so when you go into that conversation and you can relate to their passion too, that's why most of us are here, even the non-clinicians, because we believe in it and we believe in caring for people. If you can relate to that need, go backwards from there. Then what are you most afraid of? What do we need to prevent? Here's how the technology works. Where do we need to get the legal team involved? And you really have to work through a process. So I could talk for hours about how I've learned a lot. I will not, but I think that it's an emerging sales field, selling AI, especially in healthcare, which is a highly regulated industry.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And we can have more discussions after the panel. One last question from my side, and then we'll open up. We have seen predictions that AGI is coming not far away, 5 years out, maybe shorter. So the question to the panel, just a simple one. What do they feel in a non-clinical use case with the adoption of agentic AI and AI becoming prominent? Is it 5 years, 15 years, 20 years? Maybe just a yes.
I think it depends on the use case. ALI to AGI to ASI. Basically, ASI is attempting to transcend human endeavor. Is the progression that people talk about in terms of objectives. But I don't think it's going to be a point where every application or use case to be effective has achieved AGI, for instance, or not. It really depends on the use case. Otherwise, as long as you are I think, so therefore your question really relates to the foundational technologies that underlie the progression we have, right? So you're talking about basically LLMs. Do LLMs in a general sense start to approximate human intelligence in their reasoning capacity? I think if you try to boil the ocean, meaning that it truly is similar to a human brain in almost all aspects, you're looking at least 10 years, regardless of what people. But
10 years.
But if you look at it from a limited use case standpoint, or even a limited domain, horizontal or vertical, it's happening now.
Yeah.
So in certain aspects, if you're narrow, you can, there's AGI now. In other aspects, it's not even begun because nobody has addressed that use case. I think it's going to be a progression. There isn't an end point. Like I said, 10 years. It's there now till 10 years. You just see a conglomeration
of different use cases.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to tell Ms. conclusion-wise, because when AI just came up, or actually it has started booming in the last few years. Most of the time, everybody, as soon as ChatGPT came, various versions, everybody felt, oh, that's it, people are going to, this is going to take over, that's going to take over. But now having involved, making all these solutions and creating something, right, for clinical all this. And I'll tell you one thing, that human brain, God-given brain is very complex, okay? And it's not that easy to replace.
Agreed.
So whoever is here and whoever what people think that it's going to take off. So actually Ravi was discussing, and which we are going to embark into. What we are doing so far is trying to see this, whatever this AI is doing, can it at least replicate what human is doing? And you see how much we are training. Okay, and you can see amount of brain that goes into making something, how much it is training, the energy it is using, all these things. Now, what we are trying to see is, can it think more than the human brain? And that's what we are going to embark. We are going to check, we are going to see, because we have a lot of data, and when we are doing the procedures, a lot of ideas how to do it. But I am still skeptical whether this can do something else. So, bottom line is, the God-given human brain is so complex, it's not that easy to replace.
I like that answer.
And I think I have to leave now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
They will answer.
Thank you. We have your team here. Yeah, please go ahead.
I have no prediction, except I would actually say the thing that I didn't say earlier about use case selection. The other thing that I think was really important to note is standardization.
Yes.
So I think the level of standardization by which is applied to the use case that you're putting into the market actually probably does reduce its level of risk and complexity. So if it's a highly standardized protocol or workflow or process, and with a lot less risk, it's almost like an intersection point, lower risk, higher standardization. It's here today. It can be fully replaced today. The higher the clinical risk or risk at all in the individual, with the less amount of standardization around the protocol or the way that you control the interaction, to the doctor's point, I think we're a bit far away from that. So I think that that's going to be the key, is what kind of use case, what level of standardization versus clinical risk, and the adoption's here today for those that are less clinical risk, higher standardization.
All right.
I guess we have someone here today from the AGI team of Amazon. Maybe they are better.
Rohit used to work with us. Yeah. He can't comment based on your company, but in general you can talk about it.
I cannot talk about lots of details that I cannot.
It's an aggregated industry. Okay.
Or if someone can sell to the AI governance councils one day, I would assume AGI is here. I think that's the most difficult thing to do. No, I mean, I have no experience.
Thanks. Samrat?
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I don't think we really need AGI. We have enough problems today. A lot of the panelists have talked about it. Let's focus on applying the technology we have today to solve today's problems. And I wouldn't want to be in a world where we've reached AGI, because I think humans are always going to be on top, right? The next level, when we reach AGI, what we consider AGI today will be, again, humans will be smarter, hopefully will be adding a lot of value to solve the world's problems. So that bar, in terms of what becomes AGI, is also going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, to me, more than anything, it's a marketing hype. Yes, I think you guys are moving the needle, but I would say, yes, it's good to aspire towards that. Certainly, SuperSafe Intelligence is a company that's raised $50 billion without a product. OpenAI founders, they're all trying to get there. But I think we have enough problems today in healthcare we need to solve.
Which you can address with the technology we have.
Yeah, exactly. So I would wait and see. It's easy to make some predictions, but I'm not too worried about whether AGI is coming or not.
All right. With that, we'll open up to the audience. Just raise your hands. I'll just pass the mic around. Just introduce yourself, what do you do, and the question.
Yeah, I'm Shantanu, Star International company I'm working at. First, thanks for taking the time. One of the questions I had was like, as opposed to say, mobile phones which are the same globally, iPhones, Androids of the world, or even like operating systems, most of the time the healthcare ecosystem is very different across. It's very diverse, right? And even there are larger pharma companies or larger medical providers versus small clinics. Agentic deployments across them is rather multifactorial problem. So curious to hear the panel's thoughts about it. Like, how do you see recent in the near term evolution of agentic AI deployment in the healthcare space across the world? Curious to hear.
Yeah, go ahead. Anyone can participate.
I mean, I can share some experience from my side. So, I think a good analogy here would be what Palantir has done in terms of building an ontology foundation for the enterprise data systems. And it's the same problem that they faced in deploying traditional data analytics or data heavy software at larger enterprises, how to bring consolidated data, getting data from SAP and ERP system, which is like all the master data, all the objects, bring data from maybe the domain specific system, like if it's a building management system. Then how do you sort of correlate the various objects with one another and have that foundation in place on top of which you can build out various applications on the common data model. Now it has actually become a lot more easier. So I think Palantir, all the hard work that they did over 10 years or so, I mean, they have a lot of enormous advantage in addition to that, but they have actually lost that ontology advantage because now correlating objects from multiple systems across is a solved problem, and using that in conjunction with MCP protocol, that has really become the foundational architecture on which you will consolidate various data systems. And healthcare, you're exactly right, there are probably 1,000 types of EMRs, Epic being the biggest one, but there are many other ones as well. There are all kind of new systems coming in. So I'm assuming that there has to be something like Palantir. I mean, I'm not from healthcare, so can't really exactly comment on that, but something like Palantir with MCP protocols could also be the standard architecture for consolidation across healthcare. Anyone?
It's good.
All right.
Okay.
So just talking about scaling and basically unifying things across an enterprise. Andrew and I have experience already. Just launching this care coordination app for one single use case, which is STEMI. And across the board, we want to say that they want things to be the same, but they're not. We thought that what we designed for our own use case, clinical use case, even though it's being taken care of at 3 different hospitals in our health system, was completely different at other health systems. But at the same time, they want things to be the same. But the clinical use cases, the clinical workflows at each different site is different. So, to answer your question from your viewpoint, and in terms of how do you handle scaling, you want to be unified, but at the same time, you don't want to be unified because you still need to match clinical workflows. Asking someone, and Erinne will tell you, asking someone that's been in business or has been operating this way, they do certain things for 30 years, and particularly with healthcare, you've got to say, no, that's not going to match this workflow. Because in the back of the mind, you know that your development to match their workflow is an enormous undertaking. So, yes, I want to say it has to be the same because from an overall enterprise standpoint, they want to see one central system, but at the same time, you can't be the same.
But I will say that depends on the use case and how clinical it is. Because if you standardize, you can standardize more administrative use cases much easier than you can a clinical use case, because in healthcare, and this is a good thing, the physicians still rule on the outcomes that they need to have based on their workflows. So to your point, and I think I said this earlier to someone, I said, don't ever go into a standardization effort in a clinical use case and expect that to actually be. Because there's no such thing. The front end can be, the back end will not. It will always require customization to a certain level. So reflect that in your pricing.
Yeah, we will.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Basically, the human anatomy is not uniform. I mean, it's simple as that, and all emanates from there. If you think of a heart, I spend a lot of my life financing medical device business. So if you look at just a medical device, theoretically, if you have a cardiology device for a certain procedure, you're trying to, let's say, replace a mitral valve, like you do. So, if just trying to enter the heart is a challenge in and of itself. If you're trying to go, let's say, to the left atrium of the heart. Hearts are rotated, hearts are floppy, hearts have hardware, modifier, procedures. So it's only when you go in with the catheter that you realize what the challenges are and how you navigate them. I think trying to standardize anything like that is a death knell. It's impossible. And that's where the skill sets come, right? Where experience comes. The only way, in my opinion, to drive any kind of standardization in the clinical aspect of healthcare is to quote-unquote democratize, which is basically saying, if I can replicate what Dr. Kini did when she faced a particular anatomical challenge in a procedure, and have AI advise on a real-time basis while the procedure is happening, and take that experience and push it down to a less experienced practitioner, right? You start to move towards more standardization. So when they say democratization of healthcare, that's really what it means. It's basically taking the best practices of people like her with their experience and driving it down to people with lesser experience. That, it's not standardization, but okay, it basically is, let's say, more productive and better outcomes. So trying to drive standardization will lead to poorer outcomes, and nobody will say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we talked about it as well. Other questions?
There's one back here left.
Yeah. Someone raise their hand. Yeah. Okay, good. Just state your name and question.
Hi everyone, I'm Raina. I work at Invaluable Pharmaceuticals, which is a global pharmaceutical company. My question is, especially in the healthcare space in pharma, for example, the level of adoption has been very different by company, and it depends on size of the company, what countries it operates in, what regulations it changes. The tech space, however, has moved so quickly. There was a lot of buzz with Gen AI starting up in 2023, and now it's already getting to Agentic AI. What advice, or how would you help a company think through when they're very tech nascent and starting out their Gen AI journey, how they're going to adopt Agentic AI? Whether that's supposed to be a stepwise process and they have to get experience in one before moving to the other, or is there already opportunity to skip levels and leverage Agentic AI in a company that doesn't have the experience before that?
Question for you. It's a technical question.
You kind of already answered it before.
Maybe I'm not a technical person, but
Yeah, so I think this is where is there business model disruption? Because to me, technology is cool. You're always going to have these inflection points where there's new tech coming in. I've lived through that in different industries. I would answer the question by saying, are you truly changing the business model that the technology enables? So in healthcare, value-based care, right? That's what everybody wants to get to, because you want to achieve better health outcomes at the lowest possible cost points. And if agentic AI systems remove the drudgery, all the administrative burden, paperwork, coding, care coordination, low-hanging fruits, then I would imagine, business would, that's going to transform the business. So I would tie that into, and I think we talked about that, ROI and things of that nature. So tech to me is just plumbing. As a technologist, it's good to have better and better plumbing, but really the question has to be for that business, is there a business model transformation?
Yeah, and trust and confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is, will the stuff even work? So,
thanks. I think we'll take one more question and then.
My name is Lev. I work in a company
we automate business processes. Recently joined the company, and they work mostly with healthcare. So healthcare is basically new to me. I want to understand what are the use cases. My question is, can you share a story that you were to implement the technology, you had a theory how it should work, passed the testing, passed everything. It went into production, but something went wrong. So basically, we failed, or not failed, but something it didn't prove the theory, right? Can you share anyone?
Yeah. We do that on a daily basis. So I think so the story, or I'll just answer the question in a different manner, right? But the question. So what happens, right, and this is true for any technology, when we test or we do all due diligence, it's a part of all the potential scenarios that technology can see. Right? I'll take an example of autonomous driving where I work at NVIDIA. Right? It's so difficult to make it work in real life scenarios because there's so many corner cases. You always test it for few cases and it's good. But when you put it in real life scenario, it just fails so many times. So the real world is so dynamic and complex that leads to that make this scaling part extremely difficult. And that's where we have to be very careful and rigorous when we basically what we call as do a proper validation of the technology we put in.
Can I add to that? That's
Sure.
something that, again, I'll bring the business element into this because this is a lesson learned out of many companies that are implementing brand new processes as a third party. You are already going to be the one that they come after because you're the third party that's implementing the new process and not from inside. I cannot emphasize enough what critical role account management plays in the relationship management of any customer that you're implementing anything with. Low tech, high tech, right down the middle, doesn't matter. I've implemented processes, I've implemented services, and I've implemented technology. All of them mess up when you're trying to implement inside someone else's world and in their process. And if you don't work together with them side by side and understand the failure and then say we'll do everything we can to fix the failure and figure out what the root cause is behind that failure, you'll never recover. And I've been on both sides of not recovering and then thinking we're dead and they're going to kill my company, and it came back 100% and we grew the business over 300%. So you can rescue it, and you need to go into every account assuming you're going to fail. And account manage like you're going to fail. And make sure that you've planned for that in your resources and your pricing and your structure of sales. And I cannot emphasize that enough because I hear and I've heard many companies say, account management comes later, I'll deal with that after I sell. Don't wait for that. Because then it's too late, because you can't recover.
100%.
You talk to our sales team?
Very well said.
Many lessons learned.
So thanks a lot. Thanks for coming. First of all, a big round of applause to the distinguished panel. They were amazing. I'm sure we can continue for another hour, but I think we have to wrap up. So, and thanks a lot for everyone for coming. We'll be doing these events every other month, so look out for the next one. And I hope the panelists can stay a little longer. You can interact with them. There's pizza and soda, so I think so. Please continue. Thank you. Thanks a lot for coming.
Hi, Samantha. Hi.